Coming up next on Union Label will be a conversation with J.W. Cleary and Benny Heady. Welcome to the Union Label. I'm your host, Barry Craig. I'm a retiree member of American Federation of Teachers Local 1360, and I'm an active member of the Kentucky State AFL-CIO Executive Board. Dr. Martin Luther King famously said that the labor movement and the civil rights movement are natural allies. My friend, the late W.C. Young, a national labor and civil rights leader from Paducah, told me, in fact, he's told one of my guests this many times, they never went anywhere without his NAACP card and his union card in his wallet. I've got both of mine today, and so do my guests. Welcome to the program, J.W. Cleary, President of the Paducah McCracken County NAACP, and Benny Heady, Vice President of the Paducah NAACP. J.W. is retired from Steelworkers Local 550 at the atomic plant. That's what we'll always call it, the atomic plant. And Benny at Plumbers and Steam Fitters Local 184. Welcome to the program. Let me begin with a quote from Dr. King it's from a letter to the Amalgamated Laundry Workers, which he wrote in January 1962, and get your reaction to this. As I've said many times and believe with all my heart, the coalition that can have the greatest impact in the struggle for human dignity here in America is that of the Negro and the forces of labor, because their fortunes are so closely intertwined. What about that?
You know, Barry, like you said about WC was my probably biggest mentor, and he always talked about the labor union, and of course he was a life member with the NAACP. In fact, the untold story, WC was one of the very few golden heritage members of the NAACP, and of course
now what is that?
Well, that means that you paid your life membership, and then you went a step above, and of course, and he was one of what they call the golden heritage. So he was the top of the line with the NAACP. And as most of you know or you don't know, he was also the top of the line with the labor union. In fact, WC was just a remarkable person. He always took the attitude of trying to make a difference for everybody. And when I think of the labor union, kind of like Dr. King, of course Dr. King is one of my mentors also, is the fact that we as African Americans wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for the labor union, because of the fact that what it tended to happen is the fact that it gave us the opportunity to make the kind of money like everybody else was making, because of the fact that a lot of times you get the question, they'll say, well, what do you want out of life? You know, well, I want the same thing you want, is the attitude that we took. And so money might not be everything, but it helps and makes a difference along the way.
Mm-hmm. Benny, give us your take on that statement.
That was a very, very powerful statement, and it is also true. And when I look at the NAACP and organized labor, I see as we both come in existence because of struggle. Both have struggled to try to get something to make things better for people, for families, that we can live with have a good wage, and as JW has spoken to, you know, is having the same things others have. So to me, Barry, it coincides and comes together because we both struggle. I can remember walking picket lines. You don't see that anymore much. I think the UAW now is doing it. But I can remember every contract, you know, that was the thing, was a strike and trying to maybe get 50 cents more on your wages, and maybe getting a little bit more paid on your health and welfare. So it was a struggle. It was a struggle, and so I think both of us, the NAACP, and we as African Americans can relate to organized labor and the NAACP, is because we both come through struggle, and struggle is still going on.
Years ago, I read a pamphlet from the UAW called "Heritage of Struggle." Do you think young people today in the NAACP, as well as organized labor, understand the struggle that their forebears had to go through?
That's a part that young folks just don't understand. We actually paved the way for them, and what tends to happen is that they think that everything is okay but it's a continuous, like Benny said, it's a continuous battle. I mean, you always got to just keep working and fighting. And you know, the part that we probably left out is the women. White women as well as black women. In other words, the labor union and the NAACP was right there for the women movement.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, it was just the fact that it was kind of like, don't want to really make it sound too harsh, but the white man had all the superiority. In other words, they just felt like that they were better than the women and better than the African Americans. But we all. My philosophy in life is, if we work together as one, then man, the sky is the limit. But you sometimes you can only go so high if you're not working together. But if you're working together, the sky is the limit. And that was the philosophy of Fred Paxton. Fred Paxton took the attitude that making the playing field level makes a difference in a whole community.
Benny, and we'll do JW too, talk about your career. You graduated from high school, and then you join the union then? And just talk about going through, because of course JW comes from an industrial union, the steelworkers. You come from a craft union, and we can maybe compare and contrast that. So you then go you're an apprentice.
Yes.
With 184. So let's talk about that.
Apprentice with 184. Started work, and in fact, Barry, when I was asked if I wanted to be a pipe fitter, I didn't even know what they was talking about. And so anyway, I thought, you know, it's a job, so I got to try this, you know. And so I went to work, and I met a lot of guys that were helpful. I met some wasn't helpful. So a lot of times, yeah, I had to struggle to do things and get things done and keep a job and so forth. And going back to what we was talking about at first, what JW was talking about, you know, young people don't realize what it took to get where we've got today. And I think one thing is that they don't understand that it took a struggle, and it took a lot of people to do without in order for them to get where they at. When I was a apprentice, you know, there's a lot of things, you know. They say, well, you know, you're apprentice, you can't do that. Well, and then as time went on, and I got to a point where I said, hey, I'm not apprentice anymore, and I can do what you do. And so that's what it took. A lot of times they try to hold you back, and I work with some mighty good people out of 184 that seeing that I wanted to try and that I was doing the best I could do, and so they helped me to become what I am and be able to retire and have a good retirement.
Historically, as you know, craft unions were primarily white men only. So were you sort of a pioneer with 184?
Glad you brought that up, Barry. I was the first African American to complete the 184 apprenticeship program. So there were no blacks on jobs when in 1972. Willie Fields was an operator, and I was a pipe fitter apprentice, and Willie was an operator journeyman at the time. And we, most of the time, other than maybe one or two laborers, were the only blacks on a huge job. Yes.
How did that feel?
Well, it made me realize that, hey, you know, you're in a place where some people thought you didn't belong. And I was even told that at times that, you know, I was taking the white man's job, is basically what they were saying. But I had guys that I work with that come to my defense, and they never said that to me again. So it's been a struggle, but it's been in my opinion, a good struggle. It made me learn a lot of things, see a lot of things, and I used to think everything was just took for granted. This is what happened. This is why this is. But through my working life, I realized that, somebody fought for this in order for you to have it.
JW, let's explain who Fred Paxton was and his relationship with the Paducah branch of the NAACP. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, when I think of, in fact, most of the time when I'm talking, I think of the role models, people like W.C. Young and Fred Paxton. I put him in the same group, Curly Brown. In other words, my philosophy is that if you look at the big picture in any community, a community is only as good as the people in it. And I really believe that people like Fred Paxton and W.C. Young, they had a vision that the fact that we got to learn to work together. In fact, I never probably would have joined the Lounge Club, for instance, a good example, if it wasn't for W.C. Young. He said that you can't expect white Americans to participate with what you're doing if you don't participate a lot of times what the white Americans do. Kind of like what Benny said. A lot of times we were the first. I can remember so many times I was the first to do this and I was first to do that. But I took the attitude that what I was trying to do was that when people tell you, no, you can't, and I took the attitude, yes, I can. Not bragging, but I even bought a house one time, built a house. In other words, these are the type of things that you can't have. But yes, you can, but you got to work for it. And that was what Fred Paxton, what he did is the fact that he donated, it ain't no secret, but he donated $1 million to the NAACP, and that was the beginning of the what we call now the McCracken County Community Career Endowment. In other words, and his whole philosophy, his whole thinking is to help level the playing field. He just looked at the big picture to the point of whereas if we can work closer together, and the sky's the limit for us. And that's the attitude that I take, is the fact that thank God for people like that sit the role. And so I feel like I'm obligated to try to do the same thing, to try to help somebody else along.
Of course, Fred was the publisher of the Paducah Sun and Paducah Sun Democrat back in the day, and also he was the head of WPSD as well. The Steelworkers, historically being an industrial union, black, white, male, female, all together, it is a whole different, it's a total trade union, not just white guys only. And so talk about when you first got a actually you were OC, Oil Chemical Atomic Workers originally, and then they became part of the Steelworkers. So what was it like when you went to work at that plant?
Really, it kind of like what Benny was talking about. It was so many of those people that's been on those jobs for years, they really didn't want African Americans coming into the picture. And I go again, they didn't want women coming into the picture either. In other words, they actually would try to tell us that we couldn't do this or we couldn't do that. But hey, we did the exact same job that everybody else did. In other words, the fact that I never will forget, I was asked to be a control room operator. Well, that was unheard of African American being a control room operator, And so, but I took on that challenge, and I was a control room operator. Even up at Calvert City, running the furnace and stuff of that nature. In other words, they felt like that it was a job that they did. But then again, I did the hot jobs too, whereas stoking them furnaces, boy, and you talking about a hot son of a gun, boy, it was hot. But I took the attitude that I wasn't there just for myself. I was there trying to make roads for other people to come behind me. Yes, we can, because so many times you were saying that you can't do this and you can't do that, but yes, you can. Yes, I can. I can do it if you show me. But that's the mentality of African Americans. For a long time, even a quarterback. We played football, we could play all the positions, but they didn't want us to play quarterback. But now it's more quarterbacks, African American quarterback than the white American quarterback, almost, So it's the thing of African Americans, they got a thing that if you just give them an opportunity and a chance, they'll show you that they can do it.
Well, speaking of women too, we had Donna Steele. I was in a program with Donna Steele, who was a pioneer. A woman worked at the atomic plant, and again, it was mostly men back in those days as well. Going back to WC, I believe I'm right when he joined the union movement before World War II, that unions were still pretty much segregated then. And of course, A. Philip Randolph with the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, and again, and going back to the days, I'm 73, so I think I probably am older than both of you all, I believe, but. And you remember the Jim Crow, and when I taught it here for 24 years, I would do lectures on the Jim Crow era, and I would always stress to my students, we're talking the 1960s, not the 1860s, the 1960s. And I remember growing up in Mayfield, segregation was everywhere. Even cemeteries were segregated. And talk about growing up in Jim Crow Paducah.
Go ahead, Benny.
I remember some things very well. Some things. When I was about 4-year-old, I still remember White Owl, and my
remember
dad,
what?
White Owl was the name of the restaurant.
Oh, okay.
And down where the what is it, beer works?
Yeah.
It was in that area right there, and but anyway, we would go down on Saturdays. As Mom and Dad every Saturday morning they'd go to town. You know, we'd go downtown, and of course I didn't know. But anyway, we would go to White Owl after we was there a while. We would go eat. Well, we would always go back to where the barbecue pits were. And the smoke, and sat there and eat. And I didn't understand, and I could look through the screen and I could see people in the other part of the building, and I always wondered why we're not going in there and eating. We eating out of here. But later on, as I got older, I realized, that's when it was a Jim Crow law, and that was one of the things I could really relate to. One of the other things was school. I started school, West Paducah, and a great school, and it was all black. And in 1966, schools were integrated, and we went to Heath, and it was the first time that I was able to know what having a new textbook was. And I never forget how excited it was the first day I went to Heath, and I come home, and I told my mother, I said, Mama, I said, look, I have a brand new book. I mean, it was just, I'd never seen that before. I thought everybody had used books. I thought everybody had books that had been passed down, not realizing that because you being African American, you only got what was passed down. The white kids, they had new books, and I would always, realize I'd go through books. Some of them would have names in them, and some of them would have pages marked up, and I just didn't understand it until later on. I realized this is what was going on. So it's a great experience.
JW?
When he talked a little bit about that, I remember Bonton's restaurant. The fact that it was a barbecue place. Everybody else could come through the front door and get their food or whatever, but we had to go in the back door. I remember that. I can even remember going to the movie theater and paying your money at the front door, but then you had to go around to the back door. But we didn't think nothing about it. Until you got older, like Benny said, is the fact that until you got older, you realized that, hey, things are a little different. I can even remember right here in Paducah going to the dentist. I had to go up the back stairs of the dentist, but I didn't think nothing about it. I just went on up the back stairs, and you came back down them back stairs, It's just the fact that we realized that stuff of that nature went on, but we didn't think nothing about it. Thank God things are much better today than they were yesterday. And we hear people talk about that was in the past. Yes, it was in the past, and we don't need to stay in the past, but we don't need to forget the past of how far we've come. We've come a long ways, but it's still a continuous battle.
We've got a ways to go.
We still got a ways to go, Barry. It just seemed like that. I don't know, but I'm not griping. I'm just thinking that We just got to keep working at it and trying to help make a difference. But I still tell people all the time, when they win, we win. When we win, they win. In other words, we're all in this thing together, and we got to learn to work together as one another.
Let's talk a little more about W.C. Young. We all knew him. You all knew him a lot longer than I did. One of the interesting things he did, he was an avid student of labor history. And after he died, Carol, his widow, called Gerald Watkins and me and said, would you like to have some of W.C. Young's books? And we said, we did. And Gerald has some, and I have some. He grew up in Paducah. And I know back when I was at the Paducah Sun a century and a half ago, we did a story on the 37 flood. And W.C. told us about his experiences in the 37 flood. He goes to work, I believe, at the railroad shops, and that was his first union job.
It was.
And then he went into World War II, but he came back, and he wound up being a regional COPE, Committee on Political Education, COPE director for the AFL-CIO based in Chicago. But he always stayed, he commuted from Paducah. That was his home. You all knew him personally. Talk a little bit about him personally.
You know, I'm not sure exactly how close Benny knew him, but
Yeah, I didn't know him.
I really took the attitude that WC, boy, he just tried to show you all the time during his teaching. And of course, I can even remember when he would become, I want to say that he worked for the governor. And
He did.
He had an office downtown.
He did.
And buddy, I tell you what, he just took the attitude, he just tried to instill in me, and that's the only reason why that I know that people like Fred Paxton that started taking a liking with me is just the fact that he just always talked about, we got some tough times ahead of us, but we still got to learn, just keep punching away, trying to make a difference. And that, to me, I guess if you would think of WC, I honestly believe, you know, you hear people all the time, you hear them saying, well, I don't look at color and stuff like that. I honestly, in my heart, felt that WC worked so hard trying to make togetherness and working together. I really believe sometimes that he didn't look at color. I mean, he just looked at the big picture that at the end of the day, we got to learn to work together and participate together, and took that same attitude that we're all in it together. And if I constantly say that, if you win, I win. If I win, you win. In other words, and that was what WC was all about. I mean, he had, like you said, he would go back and forth to Chicago. Nearly every weekend, he would wind up right back here in Paducah, Kentucky. But come Monday morning, a lot of times, he would go right back to his office there in Chicago. But WC was a true role model for many of us here in Paducah, Kentucky. He really and truly was.
One of the things, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, is young people. I ask union folks this all the time, and if somebody could come up with a definitive answer to this, you could write a book. How do you get young people interested in organized labor, to be active? I used to be on the area council here for years, and let's face it, JW came, most of the folks there we got a few miles on our odometers. And it's the same with the NAACP. Our chapter in Mayfield, the majority of us are older. So any thoughts on how you can get young people involved in organized labor? You know, it's one thing, somebody told me a long time ago, there are union people and union members. A union member just occasionally goes to meetings, but a union member is somebody who's a movement person. So how do you get, in your all's opinion, young people interested in the union movement and the NAACP?
You know, Barry, you hit the nail on the head. I wish I had a good answer for you.
So don't feel bad. Nobody knows.
But
Yeah.
you know, I think somewhere down the line we dropped the ball and maybe didn't instill in them in what we come through to get to where we at.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to stay interested in these labor movement and NAACP, because this is why you are where you at. I think a lot of our young people think that Highway 60 was a 4-lane all the time. I can remember when it was a 2-lane.
Oh, sure.
You know, I remember it well when it was a 2-lane.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happened. And a lot of times I've also heard older parents say, well, I don't want my kids to come up like I did. Well, I didn't either, but sometimes I wish they had it. And you know, I thank God for my kids. They're doing good and so forth. But yet they probably still don't understand the struggle like I did. And what we could do to instill in the young people is that this is where you come from. And you know, the Bible teaches us, forget not to tell your children's children,
Amen.
where I brought you from. And I think we've dropped the ball somewhere down the line, and it might not be all the answer, but I think it's part of the answer.
No, I think that applies to organized labor as well, the NAACP. Your turn.
Well, but you're right. You're right on what you're saying is the fact that we got to teach them and let them know that just because things are the way they are now, it ain't always been that way. But I'm the type of person where I'm not griping and I'm not complaining. But yeah, I think it ain't nothing wrong with trying to let our kids know. I think that's the biggest thing. I don't want them to have to go through what I went through, but it ain't always been as hunky-dory as you think it is.
And I think we're about to run out of time, but I remember going back to my lectures, these kids, they would have these looks of like, it just is incredible. And I said, once again, I kept saying, now, I remember that when I was a kid, this is when I was young that this happened. And again, and going back to unions really quickly, you get a kid who graduates from high school, maybe worked in a grocery store part-time, made minimum wage, goes to work at a plant. Man, look at this big hourly wage, look at these benefits, look at this vacation, all this stuff. Isn't this a nice company to give this to me? It's the union that got that for you, not the company.
That's right.
And I think unions, if I may sermonize a little bit, they'll just stress that. They didn't give this to you out of the goodness of their heart. They gave it to you because the union gave it to you. The union won it for you right there. So, well, thank you all very much for being on the show. We're all out of time. It's always goes by very quickly, and I always like to stop on time, you know, because I don't want to get yelled at, you know. They may cancel my show, you know. So, thank you all for joining us. My guests today were J.W. Cleary and Benny Heady. I hope you guys can come back again sometime.
Anytime.
Outstanding. Thank you very much.